This morning is bright and early with the magic water guy, AJ Olsen. We're very honoured to have AJ here with us today. So we're just having already D&Ms.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we need to go live. AJ is an absolute super genius. Now, he comes from the water space that we do work in. And AJ is on a huge mission. I will let him describe and share with you the mission that he is on and why it's so unique and why it's so powerful and why it's really going to revolutionize and change a lot of systems that we think are normal these days. But AJ, just to actually start, I don't even know how we met AJ. I think it's just all come through online. There's been a couple of referral points from you to us about go follow this guy in the water space. He's doing really awesome things. And I'm real sciencey, but you're like a whole nother level. And I love it. So I'm sure we can dive down that rabbit hole. But thank you for being here today, AJ, this morning. It's really honorable to have you on, and we really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get into the chat. There's so much to go. Maybe what we'll do is we'll just start, AJ, like, who are you for everybody who's watching, maybe never come across your platform before? We've got men, women inside our platforms, and especially the Facebook group. So there's a vast majority, some business owners, entrepreneurs, mums, dads, all the things. So who is AJ? Where did you start, and then how did you get into the space that you're in now, and why? I guess that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for having me here this morning. It's so good. Again, privilege as well to just be having the conversations, like having the yarns. It's so good. Speaking about this stuff, gets it into fruition and movement and inspires change in others as well to then go on that similar path. So, and it's just great to have these type of conversations with, you guys as well, like who are in the very similar mindset of, we've got issues within our ecosystem, within our people on the planet, all the things, and we can share through our voice, we can share that. Now, I suppose for people that don't know me, so I am a water ioniser distributor as well. And I started my business last year in January. After I started the business, I came up with this vessel, which turned into restructured water regeneration. And that's the business that really came from this passion around utilizing electrolyzed reduced water in the farming space. And a little bit about myself, I suppose, coming from a health and wellness background, studying Zen Tai Shiatsu bodywork therapy, and being passionate about like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and just that whole health and wellness space in general. It was kind of a no-brainer. And it was just like, when I was presented with the opportunity, I was just like, absolutely, let's go. Like, this is just 100% my new direction and where I'm going. And I didn't know what it looked like, but, reflecting on what was really coming through at the time back then and now in this moment, it's just like, I'm so grateful for what's happened in that journey. And it's one of those things that's really shaped me into the business owner and person I am today, that's able to then come here and present some of these new ideas around regenerative farming, around creating, a low tox, chemical free, business or interview or, something like that. Not interview, so business or lifestyle. And, it's just like, it's just exciting, and I'm just like, when I have these conversations, it just feels so nice to be able to present these things. So, but that's a little bit about like myself. And, I'm more than happy to move into whatever direction you guys want to go this morning.
That's all good. All right, let's maybe start with, just because you said restructured ionized water and restructured water and regenerative farming, maybe just quick definition of what those two mean. So I know as you use the terminology about what we're about to go into, people can follow along quite easy. I'll just pop that out there. So both, if you can give those meanings. Thanks, AJ.
Yeah, so I suppose like restructured water regeneration, I suppose where that came from was coming from a background of farming. So syntropics, which is agroforestry, that really is just a type and a style of farming that we practice in the regenerative space. Comes out of Brazil. And then you've got, restructured water. So for people that don't know what that is, you've got um, the fourth phase of water. And basically, it's basically where you're using natural vortex or structuring technology to bring back the crystalline structure to the water that um, usually happens within, if you go to a spring and you watch, the water flow over a stream or a spring, you'll see vortexing happening, and that's present. And it's a new space. There's a guy named Gerald Pollock. He has Pollock Labs, which now has been rebranded. I forget the actual name of it, but it used to be Pollock Labs. And he basically founded the fourth phase of water and that whole concept. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. Pretty much, as far as we know, it's just throughout history. It's like the sort of story behind restructured water and structured water. It's quite an in-depth conversation, and the science is very new. But it's all leading into this regeneration through our food, our health, our wellness, and then soil. And that's where the regeneration sort of came in for me, coming from that regenerative farming sort of space and learning about that and being one of my biggest passions. And regenerative farming, for people who don't know, so it's kind of a pop word now as well. And when I talk about regenerative farming, I talk about, not just going into a system and taking. We're going into a system for the long-term effect of that land or that soil or that system, and then basically rebuilding soil, rebuilding mycology, rebuilding, the life that's present on that land. So that can be happening through, different types of farming practices, like, syntropics, like permaculture, like natural sequence farming, rotational grazing. There's lots of different approaches to that. And obviously cattle come into that situation. So animals in the system, which are really necessary, as well as plants. And it's kind of a whole world and a whole rabbit hole when you start to go. But that's sort of a little bit of a brief, long.
Brief long.
Brief long sort of story on that.
Yeah, so that's perfect. That is amazing. Okay, so I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know all about the farming. Like, I want to know, how your great idea came about. Like, that's genius. So how, like, it's going to revolutionize the way we eat. It's going to revolutionize the way people farm in the future, and you're creating all of it. So I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know, how this box machine thing. I want to know how you came up with it. Where you've been led in the business and where your heart's going. I want to know all about the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when I first started, so like literally day one. Prior to coming into the business, I was looking into making a spring water company. I was actually looking at founding a spring water company because I was pulling water out of the ground on a property I was working on, out of this artesian spring. And then I was looking at this really unique spring water company idea. And my friend then introduced me to, Kangen and electrolyzed reduced water. And I was like really curious. I'd never heard about it before. And I was just like, what is this? And then she started to share a few things with me. And she's like, she knew I was in the farming space. And she was like, okay, I can see you're interested. Let's get on a call with, my friends. And that was her upline. And they're two of my really good friends now, as well. And so we got on a call with them. They have a property down in around Evans Head, so inland of Evans Head, down south in New South Wales. And they had been using the water for a whole range of different things within their property. And as soon as I jumped on the call with them, when that call finished, I was like, I'm 100% in.
Wow.
I was like, I was literally like, I'm 100% in. I have no doubt in my mind, this is exactly the path I need to follow. And that's where the idea came from, because they presented to me what was happening in the cannabis industry in the USA.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, cool, I can see that. And then I started to do research straight after that call, and I was like really, really fascinated with what was out there. And as I started to look into it, I was like, this is very new. There's hardly anyone in this space. And what I see here in Australia is that, well, what I found out was there's not one other single person really actually utilizing the water within commercial agricultural farming.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, great. I've got my gap in the market and I'm going in. And basically, I wanted to infiltrate that and basically become one of Australia's leading experts on electrolyzed reduced water in the agriculture space. And, I'm still working towards that goal.
Yes.
And I think some people look at me as like, I'm the person to come to now within the business of like agribusiness. But it's also like, I'm not nationally recognized yet. And that's the kind of goal that I'm moving towards, is like national recognition for, the work around electrolyzed reduced water within agriculture.
Yes.
And for me, that's totally achievable. Like, the few farmers that I'm working with already, the results that we're getting is just been absolutely mind blowing. And really that whole idea of going, well, the thing that kind of sold me was the idea of never needing to use chemicals ever again in any type of farming. And you can just use water through these ionizers. And for me, that was what really took the bait. I took that bait and I was just like, yes, this is like just nuts. And it's kind of like, is this even real? Like, what do you mean you never need to use chemicals with agricultural farming ever again? Is this? And for me, that was really the sort of the moment that I realized the potential we had, because I literally, I remember I got on a phone with a friend who I was working with as well that year. And I was like, I explained it to him and he was like, you can do what with this? Like, he's like, you can do what with this water? Like, he was so like mind blown just as much as I was.
Yeah.
And I told him all about it. And he's like, man, if we knew this when I was working with him, setting up a system on his property. And he's like, man, if we knew this when we were setting up the system, we could have saved like thousands of dollars and hours of our time, treating some of these diseases and pests within our system.
Oh my gosh.
With just water.
Full goosebumps. Like so much. Oh my gosh. AJ, so I guess one of the biggest turning points in changing systems is around the use of, I guess, glyphosate and sprays and pesticides and herbicides. Just for everybody who might not even realize what they're eating half the time of watching this live, what is the sprays? What does our generic food supply look like? And why the water is so important in this space? And if you can just talk into that a little bit for people who just don't know about sprays.
Yeah. I think these days we have a whole variety of chemicals that are used with any type of farming. Now, if you're buying from a local farmer who is chemical free and doesn't spray at all, that's the ideal situation you want to move towards. If you're still buying from Woolworths and Coles, it's most likely that the farmer that is growing that produce is going to be spraying some sort of fungicide or pesticide.
Yeah.
Now, every type of vegetable piece of produce that you buy is very different in terms of what products they use. And it's important to know, it's like, how you've got the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 13.
Yeah.
That whole thing. It's actually really great because it's actually true. And it's a good rule of thumb to stick to, because in that Dirty Dozen, there's some of the most heavily sprayed pieces of produce you can buy. So, grapes and strawberries and berries and, celery and things like that. And it's kind of like we need to educate ourselves just on the consumer level to be aware of what we're buying and then putting it into our bodies. Yeah. Now, because the change on the distribution and production end, that takes a long time to change. And I know that firsthand because it literally is seasons and years before these farmers change, because it's generational knowledge that's being passed down. And because my dad did it, it's okay. You know, that sort of mentality is what we're facing with. Oh yeah, I'll go out and spray the fields every single day with Roundup, so glyphosate-based products, which, you know, we all know, if you don't know, I suppose, are very heavily linked to things like cancer and Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that within our bodies. So it's one of those things where we need to be aware of conventional farming really has no limit on what they are going to put out on the produce or in the fields or to spray the weeds, you know. So if they're spraying a weed killer like Roundup, which is a glyphosate-based product, then even if it's not near the produce, it's around the property.
Yes.
And going into the soil. And these are some of the forever chemicals. So chemicals that never go away.
Yeah.
Or had take, you know, hundreds of years to dissipate in the soil. Now, through the regenerative farming world, we've now proven and shown that we can get rid of some of these chemicals through different mycology, so fungal-based, bacteria and dominant sort of based soils. Wow. And because some mycelium and some sort of fungus-based, you know, dominant soils, if you regenerate the soil enough, you can really go in, and some of these fungal sort of living organisms will go in and actually consume the chemicals that are there, and then turn into carbon within the soil, which helps to promote healthy soil within our system. It's kind of mind-blowing. Yeah. So now, if you are, you know, buying conventional, so Woolworths, Coles, Aldi, or just general sort of produce, one way that you can, with our water, I suppose, one way that if you've got a machine in your own home, you can use that to wash off the residue that's maybe still sitting on that produce. You know, that's one way that you can reduce the amount of chemical load that's still on the produce. Ideally, this is why I started this whole project, is I want to completely stop that production of, or that sort of use of chemical on the production end.
Yeah.
And that's ideal for not only our health as a consumer, but as an environment, as a planet, as a people, and just soil in general, and just everything that really comes into connection. So including waterways, because if you've got a farm that's backed up onto a river and they're spraying, well, that's going into the waterways, which is affecting that whole ecosystem as well.
Wow.
And and this is what I really highlight when I talk to people, is that water is at the center of everything.
Yeah.
And everything really revolves and evolves around that. And that's where we need to sort of start to think in this holistic model of, we are all right in the middle, because we are pretty much, some people say 75% water.
Yeah.
I say more like 95, 96% water. And due to the science that I've looked at, and it's kind of like we are water, and we are right in the middle of the whole ecology of everything with that, you know, happens within the world. Wow. You know, most people really think it was a pyramid where we're like, you know, dominating everything, where it's like, no, we need to come back into that circle model where we are in the middle, and then everything is connected to us. And water is right in the middle of all of that, you know. And even if you're not aware, there's this abundance that you can tap into with that water consciousness.
Yeah.
And on every level, even that word abundance, I was listening to a podcast with Paul Check and Jason Pickard yesterday and the day before. And Jason Pickard, actually, he went in and he was like, what is this word abundance? And he went and looked it up and where it came from.
Yeah, wow.
And there's the abundance, so it breaks it up into two sort of syllables. And he looked at that word, and it really came from one part of the word came from this old civilization, this old language, which means water. And then the start of abundance, so that abunda, that sort of first part of that word means underneath us. So it's that abundance which is underneath us, which is actually water, because we've got water underneath us.
Wow.
The majority of the world's water is actually underneath our feet.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, I freaking love it.
So
I feel like we could chat for a long time.
We could.
Honestly, we're so passionate about it, and I love it. I love how passionate you are, and I love that you're literally changing generations. Like you can tell like your energy. You're so committed to what you're doing, and yeah, we just really admire that. So yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. AJ, I'd love for you to share for everybody watching, and if you guys are watching the replay, please hashtag replay below and let us know any questions you've got. Reach out to AJ. He's an open book. Follow along in his journey, which he'll share all at the end. But for anyone watching AJ, like if they feel they're just like, whoa, you've got this huge mission. That's exactly what you were here for, man. Like it's not for me, whatever. Maybe they do feel a little bit stagnant in life where they're going, they're not really clear on a vision, because I believe everybody does have a mission and vision here, and it's unique to their heart and their soul. It's just really about remembering what that is or going through life and uncovering that, and that comes back with peeling back the layers and all the things. So for somebody watching now, a man or woman, what would you share with them, or what would you say and talk into around following your heart space or leaning into the mission, even if it is a bit of a path walked alone? What would you share with that about your experience so far with everything you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question, because I think as a human being, like when we have that feeling of I want to go do this, or I really want to, in that intuitive feeling, like this is my path. If you're not listening to that, like that's where we need to then tune into our inner listening, that inner knowledge, that inner wisdom that we all really do have, and follow what that's talking, like whatever that is for you, and whatever that looks like, and that might be, in your more and more in your imagination, or whatever connection might be a connection to a loved one, or some sort of religion, or whatever way. If you're following that feeling and it's intuitive and it's true to you and it feels right, and as long as you're not doing wrong by others and putting people out of their lives, and say if you want $1,000,000 and you're like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get $1,000,000, and you're wronging other people, well, like obviously that's not the way to move forward in that. But if you have a vision, like, so for example, a big mission statement within my mission is, every single year I want to work with around 50 to 100 farmers every single year. And now that has changed and adopted, because my initial mission statement said I want to get electrolyzed reduced water into 500 to 1,000 farms in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, I recently looked at that and changed it, because that's more of a decade goal.
Yeah.
Because I realized recently was farmers move at such a slow pace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much education, and what I talk about is bridging paradigms.
Yeah.
We are really bridging paradigms and bridging the gap between the conventional farming approach and getting people into, maybe an alternative regenerative approach that isn't using a chemical-based model.
Yeah.
And because of that, how that actually all came about is because every day, I had these sort of things coming through, and I was like, I'm going to follow up with that.
Yes.
And I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to make this phone call. And it was all this intuitive feeling, and just these downloads that were coming through. And I was like, this feels 100% the thing I need to do today. And even if it was just one thing, if I can completed that, then I know that I'm 1%, 2%, 5% ahead of yesterday. And it's that feeling of listening to that. It's kind of like that North Star. So I was listening to a few people talk about this yesterday on a podcast, and it's kind of like this North Star. That's how they described it. If you've got a North Star, you know exactly where you're going. You're following that North Star. But that might not be you. Maybe that's your company. Maybe that's the business, and you've got that North Star. It's very clear. But separate yourself for a second and then go, if you're a business owner or something, you are not your business. You are you and a human, and still living this human experience. And what you need to also focus on your health and your wellness and your life. You know, maybe you might need to go and do something else for a short period of time. Like, say you've got a passion for some sort of hobby and you're like, oh, I'm missing out on this. Go and do that. Really put time into that, because if you're not feeling abundant and you're just really your business and that's it, you know, you're not going to be able to do that long term. And you know, I've done that myself. I've gone way too deep into the business, and I'm like, I'm the business, and this is the, you know, this is the thing, and you know, and it really drains you very quick. And listening to, like, for my example, for me is like, I want to go surf all the time, but sometimes I can't. You know, I've got to make sacrifices and go, I can't surf all the time anymore. I've got responsibilities and things to, you know, meetings to get onto, you know, calls to make. And if I want to move the needle forward, I've got to sacrifice some of my personal time where I would normally go surfing and put that into the business. Now, I haven't surfed in a few weeks because, like, I sometimes take that to the extreme, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the business and not go. And now I have to learn that balance, and it's a constant adjustment, because if I know when I go surfing, that's when I get a lot of my downloads, a lot of the information, because I'm in flow state.
Yeah.
I'm in that sort of, my mind isn't on business, my mind is on nothing, and I'm just present, surfing, and, you know, hanging out, having fun, smiling, and it's this kind of state of joy, because I've listened to myself and I've gone and done something that I love. That's when things come through, and I'm open to then receiving. And it really boils down to that for me, when you are following your heart. And if you can do something every single day, which is small, you know, that you love, then even if it's the smallest thing, like waking up and making yourself a cacao, or waking up and like going to the cafe that you love and buying yourself a coffee, you know, it's, you know, you're not wasting money. Like, if I go to the cafe down the road, for me, like, I used to do it every single day because I love a little bit of social connection, because I see people I know there. Yeah, and I go there early, and I don't spend 5 hours there, but I spend, you know, a good hour there, you know, writing or working or something, and I get a chai, and it's kind of my, like, little, you know, my morning routine thing, you know, and it's just something small every day that's going to bring you some joy. You know, you might run into someone you know and hug them, and you get that sort of healing from another person, that human connection, and at least it keeps you sort of in your body and connecting with people. And here, because I feel like within my business, I can get so caught up with where I'm going, and the big goals and the big visions, and, you know, the future company, and being, you know, a potential CEO one day, and all these things. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm living way over here, but I need to come back for a minute and still live here.
Yes.
You know?
Presence. Oh, AJ, it's just, I'm just like, no more, no.
But yeah, I can talk for hours.
It's so good. You're such a very, very diverse person as well, like knowledge in many areas, and it comes from your interest and curiosity for this earth, and it's a really honorable thing, hugely. Okay, so where can people find you? How, like, have you got things going on with your projects at the moment that even people can get involved with, or maybe some, you know, some suggestions to people about how to help the planet or contribute to even your mission in some way, wherever they are on the planet? Share how they can follow you along on the journey as well, please.
Yeah. So the main two places you can follow me at the moment is AJ _ Olsen 1. That's my personal Instagram. I do post a lot on there regarding business stuff, water projects, regenerative farming. And then the business is RWR _ restructured water regeneration. And that's the personal, like, that's the business page on Instagram. They're the main two places. Now, I've had a few people interview me, you know, on the podcast listening world. You can find this anywhere. So you've got one I just did the other day with a friend of mine, which was really great. We really dived deep into electrolyzed reduced water and regenerative farming and 7-generational thinking, so the indigenous thinking. That's a really great one. Highly recommend listening to that. So that's Cultivating Change with Alex Corey. I think it's like episode 15, I believe. And then you can find that everywhere. So Spotify, iTunes. I think it's even on like Rumble, YouTube. It's everywhere. There's a video version and audio version. So
Awesome.
That's like probably the first podcast I would suggest. And if you want, I can also send the link over later or something if you need. But then that's probably the only podcast I'd suggest. There's a couple of older ones, but you can, if you just search up AJ Olsen on Spotify or wherever you can find podcasts. Like I think I'm like the only AJ Olsen that's done podcasts around this topic, so it's actually quite easy to find.
Yeah, perfect.
But yeah, and then look, if you want to get involved, I suppose for the people out there that are listening, if you want to get involved with what I'm doing, then feel free to reach out in any way, and I can direct you. You say you want to go do one thing and you've got a vision for something, I can direct you in that path. Otherwise, just for yourself, if you can do something small today, well, and if you're still fresh and maybe you're still shopping at Coles and Woolworths, or you're still you're not sure on where to go, like you want to get involved with the farmers or whatever, like just have a little bit of a look around in your community and wherever you are in the world, and just see who's around you. Connect in with your local farmers, your local distributors, your local producers. Maybe look into, if you're not sure about, if you've never heard about the harmful effects of pesticides and chemicals, have a look into that. Maybe if you're new in the water world and you're not sure about tap water and drinking that, because intuitively on a deeper level, a lot of us feel like we shouldn't be drinking.
Yes.
So maybe look into the harmful effects of that. I really like to empower people with going in, and if you're doing research, be very, very discerning with what you're looking at. If you're looking at scientific papers, I always just make sure, if you don't understand it, don't just read the abstract. Look at proper peer-reviewed, cited research. And if you don't know how to read that sort of stuff, make sure that if you've got a friend who's done a doctorate or some sort of uni degree, they can help you with understanding some of these scientific articles. Because a lot of the time we have companies out there, and this is the scary thing, we have companies out there funding research to sway both sides of the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing, because we've got people funding research to say, birth control or whatever the thing is okay.
Yeah.
Or like, glyphosate and, Roundup is okay on one side. And then, on the other side, it's like, or actually, no, we know all of this information and it is out there, but it's just the mainstream view and approach is very, very controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And the information is very controlled, and it's all funded usually a lot of the time by big companies, big organizations like the pharmaceutical industry, like a company like BlackRock, over which is a big world organization. There's a lot of stuff that's funded by these big organizations, which sway that conversation. So it's really, what I like to do is empower people to really do their research and do proper, research that's going to, don't just have a 5-minute Google search. It's like, spend a bit of time, spend a few days collecting notes and thought processes from different people. And maybe if you've got, if you want to get connected with the soil and plant a bit of food, that's one way you can even just get connected with yourself and your soil connection, your food connection. That's a small step. Not drinking tap water, that's a small step. Maybe cooking more food rather than going out, that's another small step. Not using seed oils, that's another small step. There's just like so many things that you can do and empower yourself with every single day. That really is a simple switch. And that's what it's about. Many people doing small change and making small actions and small changes every single day. That's going to push us all in the right direction. To this, what I call regenerative sort of way of thinking. This regenerative health, this regenerative wealth, regenerative farming, all of it. And I suppose if I can leave it on a final note, and to wrap it up, my thinking comes from a 7-generational approach.
Yeah.
And that's why I mentioned before. It's this indigenous way of thinking. We are all here as stewards to leave the planet in a better place for the next 7 generations to come. And that's my approach. So every action, every thought that I have around what I need to do within my business, I always think about, is this going to better the planet for the next 7 generations to come?
Yeah.
And that's how I operate. And that's kind of like my North Star when I operate within my business.
Oh my gosh, it's huge. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. AJ, thank you so much for coming on today. I think we're going to have you back on, definitely.
Anytime. This is fun.
Yeah, it's so good to just hear your wisdom and to be shared such amazing knowledge with as well. And I know so many people will take a lot away from it. And as I said, guys, reach out to AJ, follow him on his journey, ask him any questions, ask us any questions and we can pass them on to AJ. He is the water wizard and definitely changing the world. So jump on board his ship because it's sailing, it's sailing north, which is so incredible. That's awesome, AJ. Well, I'll stop the live stream there. I think, we've done heaps. So thank you.
Thanks.